up, and we're so excited to have this amazing panel of brilliant folks. Their bios are all in your packet, so we're not going to read all of them. But I would like to welcome up Jen Rogers from Yahoo Finance, Victoria Meakin, who is also a board member for All In Together and has been from the beginning, Carey, Kolaja, and my dear friend Dionne Gumbs, who wins for the longest distance traveled, having come from Minneapolis this morning. Dionne is also one of my fellow classmates in the Presidential Leadership Scholars Program, which if you don't know about, you should look up later because it's amazing. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jen. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. All right.
Oh,
yeah, you good? All right, good. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jen Rogers. I'm with Yahoo Finance. I'm going to let these ladies give us just a couple sentences about what you do.
Hi, I'm Victoria Meakin. I am president and co-founder of Acrolus, which is a mouthful. As we've been discussing, we're actually in the process of rebranding. But what we do is we develop solutions that extract data and analytics that we provide to alternative lenders, to fintech companies, to help them, conduct their underwriting more efficiently and to innovate and comply more on a regulatory basis, and a whole host of goals like that.
And Carey, did you not have to travel very far to get here?
I actually did, because I live in New Jersey.
Okay, so we'll let you have
yes,
that.
I did. Took me just as long as you to get
my
here.
flight.
So my name's Carey, Kolaja. I'm the Chief Product Officer for Citi Fintech, and Citi Fintech is about building the future of banking for tomorrow, but doing it today. And so with a very talented group of colleagues around the world, we're all about helping to drive Citi to change and react to the macro trends that are happening in society, and how we can re-architect the financial systems in order to support our customers of tomorrow.
All right, and we know you came far.
I did. This is actually home for me, so it's always coming home. We moved to Minneapolis last year, so I did get in late last night. But I am the CEO and founder of a startup called Gen Equity. So after about 20 years in traditional finance, I decided to take the plunge to be an entrepreneur. And what Gen Equity really does is provide lending and investment tools specifically for women-led enterprises, with the ultimate goal of really figuring out how we can continue to build financial tools that bridge the access to capital funding business that exists. So on the loan side and, of course, on the equity side. So that would be all the way up the venture capital chain to raise money, as well as providing business loans for capital financing.
Fintech, a story that we cover a lot. Interesting timing yesterday. I don't know if anyone saw the closing bell on Wall Street, but for the first time it was rung by a robot. It was celebrating the 5th anniversary of an ETF about robotics and AI, but I thought, oh gosh, right? We have so many stories about the robot revolution and people losing jobs, and it's kind of dark, but taking off where Lauren was saying, like, let's not feel paralyzed and helpless. What has you excited about fintech and AI in the finance space?
Well, that's a good segue from the robot story, because what excites me about it is the efficiencies that AI, digitization, all of these technologies are driving, are kind of deferring to the machines some menial tasks that we should not necessarily be, spending our time on, and increasingly more and more sophisticated tasks. And the way that I think about that is it is creating more opportunities for all of us to be liberated and to wield our intellect and our imagination to tackle much more challenging problems and issues that face us, because the machines are taking care of the other stuff. So I think there can be hiccups along the way, but I think that ultimately it creates more and different kind of jobs and more productivity overall.
Carey, do you agree?
Yeah, I would add to that. I mean, I totally agree to that there's this shift where we can use technology and artificial intelligence, machine learning, to really personalize and curate the ways in which we want to live our lives. So it's not just about the utility of what we do, but it's also about the lifestyle in which we want to live. And if we allow technology to do that, and I think it was Ginny Rompney that had said, like, AI and technology will enable us They will empower us. They will not replace us. And I fundamentally believe that when used the right way. I think the challenge we have with society right now, and particularly the younger generation, is that mind share being utilized wisely? Is that mind share being put to the social issues, whether it's the political agenda, the policy issues, to driving and solving the social impact issues that are out there? I mean, I was thinking a lot, Lauren, about your speech, and the thing that I've always felt strongly about is like, I'm committed to enabling financial access to everybody around the world. And to do that is to solve for some of these social issues that exist. You can't do that without technology. Technology's there. But how do we do that, and are we spending our mind share? So I think it's a double-edged sword. I agree with you, but are we actually putting that mind share to use?
Do you think we're putting the mind share to use?
I think we do. I think we do, and I think we are. I think, it's really how do we have technology and use technology to help us solve big problems in the world, right? Which both of you have said. And, for me, my challenge is always financial inclusion. And so that is the purpose of my company. That is my kind of social good. And I think there's an intersection between innovation, which creates opportunity, and inclusion, right, to your point. And that is how we should be thinking about the use of technology, whether it's AI to help us help companies learn better things about ourselves, or whether it's blockchain or some of the other things that we're hearing about. Mindshare becomes a challenge if we're not using it to solve big problems.
Can I also just add something too, is that we live in this world now, and there was a reference to it earlier of like, you can do good and do well. Yep. And statistically, like, the evidence is there, right? So 90% of the consumers, when asked, would rather buy from companies and have brand affiliation to companies that are doing, good things in the world. We have an engagement problem in our employee workforce. Employees say that they work for companies, 60% of them, if their companies were affiliated with giving something back to society. And by a result of engagement, you drive revenue and profitability up. And so there is a correlation now, and I'm struggling personally, and I'm struck by our inability to use those statistics and that evidence to actually drive change in the workforce and what we do.
Victoria, just in terms of driving good and doing well, I think there are a lot of people think there's positive and negative of all of these tech pushes that we're seeing. How do we push them forward though, and also still be true to the bottom line?
Right.
Can we do that?
I think not only can we do that, I think they are actually more aligned than a lot of people think. So as an entrepreneur, I am always seeking out ways to have a positive impact in pursuit of profits, right? Because it is about the bottom line. And I think part of the way we do that is the way that I do that is by focusing on longer term outcome. I think that there is, too much of a focus on, quarterly profits, near term profits, that just aren't driving towards the most impactful goals for companies and then for individuals. So as a VC-backed company, we by necessity have to prioritize accelerated growth, right? That's what we have to do. But we don't do that at the expense of the long-term objectives of our customers. And I think that results in creating greater value over time. I mean, at Ocrolus, I'm very proud of the fact that we help our customers mitigate credit risk, which is good for them and good for their consumers. I just covered up my mic. And then also, deliver transparency, accountability, standardization into the ecosystem, which is good for the larger economy, right? We need all of that stuff. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I guess one can make them mutually exclusive, but they don't at all have to be.
What about in inclusion? Do you feel like these two can go hand in hand as well, or does inclusion harnessed with technology come at the expense of the bottom line?
I actually don't think that it comes at the expense. So I'm probably going to challenge Lauren to add on her three-prong slide with personal, professional, political, economic, because, this is the largest growing economy in the world, right? With about $20 trillion in the hands of women today. And if we think about the inclusiveness in financial tools and some other companies that are out there through the use of technology, I do think that you're creating an inclusive body of work and ecosystem where women can actually begin to feel comfortable and confident in participating in that economy. And that is not going to come at the expense of the bottom line, right? It's going to come to the expense of, to the tune of, I think it's, I forget what the numbers are, but I think it's about $9 trillion in profits would go back to banks, right? If they were able to create tools to really actively include women around the world. I mean, that is adding to bottom line through just financial products. And that is something that is not to the expense of or to the detriment of any community or economy. It is very additive, right?
She can add a fourth P.
Profits.
Right?
Our own
There you go.
and those that are interested in it.
I want some more charts as well. I thought the ones of the country were fascinating to see the percentages of women in different roles in government. I would love to see that for finance and fintech, looking at those. And I've seen some.
I could throw out a couple of
Can you
stats.
say, yeah. So what's, I want to get, I mean, we have a lot of ladies here in a big bank building, but I think we all know that fintech it's extremely male dominated. It feels that way with the people that I interview often. I'm curious why you think that is, and throw out some of your stats. Do you have some maps?
I don't have maps, but I have stats. So first of all, I think it has to do with the dearth of women in leadership positions at fintech companies, and in this ecosystem, the venture capital firms that fund them, right? Because it's a vicious cycle. You need the money to make the business go. And when women are MIA at the top, there's an insidious trickle-down effect. And so the stats are, I think, 60% of male startups, or 60% of the startups that are funded by VCs in this space are male-led. And of the VCs out there who are, active in this space, 7% have, women at the helm. So that gives you some sense of, where we are and how much we need to do.
So what can we do, I guess, Carey? I mean, this is in the VC world. I think
I was going to add some stats too.
Give us
really a data-driven panel here. So this is an interesting question for me because I've been in technology and finance my entire life, and when you look at the roots of technology and finance, it's been predominantly men. I mean, for centuries. I mean, even now, you look at the employee base. I think put the entrepreneur. Those are great entrepreneur sets. You look at the big bank. We're in a big bank, right? You've got 46%, I think, in the financial sector that are women employees, and less than 15%, 10% that are at the top. And then you look at technology and software, which it's like less than 27%. Where you have women in that space. And so when you look at what is fintech, and it's the application of technology to solve financial problems, I think the root of where we're starting is below par. And I would liken it to almost something that Lauren was talking about in the political realm. Is it starts with increasing the funnel. So it is about role models, and it is about the investment tactics that are taken in. But at the same time, are we actually increasing the funnel to a size that when you start to dwindle down into those positions, that there's a higher probability that a woman will fall into that role? So I think the statistics are against us, even though that we're 51% of the population, at least in the U.S., and we've got more women that are graduating from engineering programs than are men now, and we've kind of crossed that mark. So one for me is, what do you do about it? It is about, I think, increasing the funnel. I also think it's about women investing in other women, which is why we're here. It's also about having a voice and taking those leaps of faith to stand up for the things that you absolutely believe, in my mind. And it's about empowering ourselves, candidly.
How do we build that pipeline up?
Oh, that's a great question. If I had the answer to that, I don't know. I'd probably be sitting on the panel at the World Economic Forum at Davos to figure that one out. But
make that a goal for you.
I will make it a goal.
Book your ticket.
So I will book my ticket. And as we talk about exposure and who we see, right? I'm going to bring up the World Economic Forum again because the panel on the future of fintech last year in 2018 was all men.
Yeah.
Right? It was all white men that were probably somewhere between the age of 35 and 60 discussing the role of fintech in the future. And yet you found us. And so I do think that the onus is on us to continue to push one another, right? To continue to support one another, to put dollars behind each other, and to really create a community. There's something that I recently read that said the reason that a lot of male businesses in the fintech world tend to succeed is because the ecosystem of men and how they network is very dollar related, right? And so we all are able to come around each other as it pertains to our professional lives and our personal lives, but when it comes to putting our dollars to work for one another, we tend to shy away. And that needs to change. It is what will change how we see each other represented in private enterprises. And that is one way to change the funnel on the private side. And obviously in the public company side, we need to really continue to support one another. Having come from that space, I do understand the challenges that come with women supporting other women, but really getting some of our male counterparts, I see some in the room, to really understand the value of having diverse decisions and diverse teams.
Can I just interject one thing? And it kind of goes back to...
Two.
There's two.
Yeah.
Two guys, yeah.
Yay!
There we go.
And he's got a number of really strong females in his life, from what I know. Right? You do have a few.
I just wanted to interject and relate back to something Lauren said about, not sure how you feel about quotas, and I'm not sure how I feel about quotas, but increasingly I'm finding what we're doing now without quotas isn't working, right? So the mentoring, the networking, the support, all of this stuff, I think we all try and do it, and it's not quite getting us there. So, I'm, thinking about and open at my own company and just in general, the idea that for every senior position that's up for grabs, whether it's in engineering or business development, have a policy where you go out and find an equal number of male and female, super qualified, amazing candidates. And then, of course, you make the decision based on, who the individual is who's the best fit at that moment for that role. But at least you've leveled the playing field by looking at, 4 of each or whatever that is. I think that may be the kind of thing that has to happen to really move the needle on the other stuff we've been doing.
Like yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I struggle with the quotas too.
Yeah,
and I think partly because my husband's in science field, and they have quotas and we have talked about candidates that he was considering, and he knew out of the gate they were not as qualified as others, but he had pressure on him to make certain decisions. And my biggest concern is you're putting somebody in a role who is not going to be successful, and therefore it only perpetuates the same narrative that we're trying to fight against. And so I struggle a little bit with it too, but at the same time, one of the things that I feel very strongly about is it's not just about other women, it's about women supporting men. And role modeling that and supporting diversity. And it's always been about diversity for me, and I know that there's some gender challenges, but we are all much better, and companies perform much better when you have diversity at the table, and it's experience, it's gender preference, it's sexuality, there's so many things to that. And so how do we role model that? Sean's on my team, and I could not be successful without him, and I... His review's coming up. But I also know there's a deep appreciation for the women that surround him in his life. And so I think that's an important piece of it.
Mm-hmm. I do think we're talking about that a lot more. I feel like I hear that it's not just about women, it's about also empowering the men to take time off, like we all do after having a kid, and giving them the benefits to do that too. So let's talk about what the situation is right now, because obviously we're talking about getting the pipeline, being better role models, figuring out how to change it. Right now, for women that are in FinTech, what are the unique contributions you think that they're actually bringing to the table?
So I do think that where we see women being very, very successful in the industry are businesses like Victoria, right? So people that are really trying to help larger institutions understand the market need through technology. And that is by creating specific vendor relationships. So for example, I come from the business side of this, and so my larger challenge has been really figuring out how to outsource a lot of my technology built to teams. And so I'm able to offer a business expertise and a business lens, and it's been a bit challenging for me to actually find a technology co-founder, right, male or female, that has the same level of intensity and vigor and rigor actually around how I see my business growing. And I do think that as it pertains to fintech in particular, you're seeing room made for a lot of women with business lens to partner up with technology folks to really move the needle in the industry. It is not being done enough, but some of the larger things, I mean, the numbers this year on the VC side, so the co-founder of Ant Financial is a woman, right, Lucy Fang, and she is now going to be doing one of their other businesses. And and Ant Financial has made a very big push to be inclusive as it pertains to hiring women, right, and putting them in roles, in science roles, and other meaningful
Another
things.
country beyond the U.S.
Another
that
country beyond the U.S. And so I do think it's a bit of a vicious kind of cycle as it pertains to that, but it's changing. I mean, it's changing. We have innovation roles within large companies, right, led by women, and that also creates room for the fintech space to grow.
Yeah, Carey, Sean aside, what unique contributions do you see women bringing to fintech right now?
So let me talk about a macro trend, and then I'll do fintech. So I had the opportunity to hear Adam Grant speak about a week and a half ago. I don't know if any of you know Adam Grant. So he's written a couple books, and he's one of the youngest Wharton professors that are out there. And he was talking about the change in leadership, and that because the world is so diverse and people can't be subject matter expertise except for in some of the hard sciences, your expertise has to be in connecting ideas, connecting peoples, connecting strategies and capabilities. And in doing that, statistically, I think there's a study in UC Berkeley that talked about like women tend to have more of a natural ability of being the connector, for like seeing patterns and being the connector. And their brain is more attuned to being empathetic. Now, I'm not going to debate the nature versus nurture thing, right? We have a lot of discussion around that, but I do think that those are qualities that are innate to where fintech needs to be, because with a big bank, we're not going to do this all ourselves. There is no way in hell. It has to be with partnerships, and it has to be with other people, and it has to be with other companies. So the ability to connect and the ability to be empathetic, not just at the top, but all the way down, I think the hierarchy, the ability to work without hierarchy, I think is really important.
Victoria, you were just talking about trying to get more women into your company and maybe looking at, all right, we always need to have a woman candidate. But besides the fact that that would bring diversity of thought, why? Like, why do you want that? Like, what do they bring?
Well, I would say diversity of thought is very important. I think, going back to the let's not debate nature, nurture, I think generally speaking, in my experience, both personally and in the workplace, women tend to be more collaborative. You can tell just when you walk into a networking event with all women, it's sort of like everybody's trying to, engage with everybody else. I think women, again, generality, tend to be more focused on common good, common goals, which I think can be very efficient. And I would just say in terms of women in fintech, the traditional banks have not always done the best job of incorporating the perspectives of women as it relates to financial services and products into, what they're putting out there. So I think that creates a real opportunity for fintech folks to, step into that, I don't want to call it a void, but, maybe that gap that could be filled a bit with those products. And that, talk about being aligned with business objectives. Women represent half the consumers buying this stuff. So why wouldn't you want to ensure that the products and services that we're putting out there resonate with women? And then there's, another kind of a social good aspect, which is to educate women about the need to investigate and best practices of how to investigate. I think many, many women just don't have that on their radar. And then we help ensure the financial security and independence of women. Again, all that stuff is good for the larger economy.
I think what's always been staggering to me on that set of 50% is 70% of the financial decisions in households are made by women.
Mm-hmm. That's right. 50% of the population, but 70% of the decisions.
70% of the decisions around the world. And in some markets, like Brazil and others that you wouldn't expect, it's even higher. Yep. And yet, we're in this conundrum right now. And so you ask yourself, well, why is that? Because we also know that you design products for women, men will buy them. You design products for men, women will not buy them.
But we have to use them.
But we have to use them.
So financial services is highly regulated. Everybody knows that. But with data science, big data, machine learning, AI, there's so much stuff coming on board right now in financial services incredibly fast. Do you think there are issues or challenges that regulators need to be thinking about right now?
Well, I think cybersecurity obviously is the larger thing that we're seeing out there. But as it pertains to how fintech companies are operating within the larger financial system, you do have certain regulations that are being heavily under scrutiny, right? So with blockchain and Bitcoin and currency, right, the government is really struggling because they move at this pace and technology moves at this pace. And so what you're seeing is regulators really trying to keep up and catch up to an industry that is changing faster than they can, have coffee in the morning. And that is now becoming a challenge. So when Dodd-Frank was passed, and then the Jobs Act was subsequently passed, you saw a lot of companies, marketplace lending in particular, they were able to really begin to figure out different ways of interacting with companies and build their businesses without having to go through strict regulatory and compliance. That has since now been, it's now changing. And so I think what you're seeing, particularly in the US, particularly in the UK, are how governments are making room within slivers of law, some of which has expired last year. We're still waiting to see what Trump will do as it pertains to the Jobs Act and some other things, what that administration will do in terms of re-upping some of the things that were passed under the Obama administration. But it is a challenge, right? Because you don't want to be in kind of a wild, wild west situation where people think they're being taken advantage of, but you also don't want to be regulatory hamstrung and constrained as a technology company.
I mean, it's interesting just looking at, obviously the midterms are coming up, who decides who the regulators are. Victoria, you're kind of on the bleeding edge of a lot of things that you're doing there. Do you feel like you have too much regulation? Is there stuff that you think regulators need to be looking at here before the horse is out of the barn in like the AI space?
Well, I would say first, there is kind of a knowledge gap between regulators and technologists, to state the very obvious. Like, just think about, the hearing with, Facebook, where like the people asking the questions were like, what is social media and where do I find this stuff? So that knowledge gap is a very, very significant challenge. But I would say I'm pro-regulation. I think that fintechs need to, it's incumbent upon us to practice proactive, responsible innovation, right? And that's not hard to do. And you do that by reaching out to regulators and working with them. And again, this goes to business. It's aligned with business needs because consumers have, been attracted to fintechs now and historically because of the ease of access to funds, right? Mm-hmm. That's great. Now they're starting to go, well, how about some bank-like regulations, along with this easy money? That would be nice. So my personal perspective is that, fintechs like me, fintechs that are actual lenders, regulators, and traditional banks, because the fintech world and the banking world are, we all know this, right? They're learning from each other, they're partnering, they're coming together. We all have to just, put our heads together and not run away from it and do it in the most responsible way possible that doesn't inhibit growth.
Carey, to you last, and then we're going to take some questions on just the regulation and what's happening in the space. I mean, do you think we need more of it? Are you like Elon Musk and think the robots are going to come and get us all, or
never
are you
had
thinking
anybody
we need more
regulation?
Wow.
Wow, that's okay. So,
How are you?
It's okay.
How do I feel? I'm thinking about Elon. I'm like, God, I wish I was building SpaceX. No, I am pro-regulation, but it's the right regulation. And I would just echo what these intelligent women have said to either of my side. What I will say is I do think that we're seeing an emergence in different regulatory bodies around the world who recognize they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the talent, and they don't have the capability to keep up, and they have to change. And the one example I will give, I was in Hong Kong about 3 weeks ago, and I spoke in front of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. And they had asked a question, the guy who heads it up, and he goes, are we doing enough Should we be doing more? And I'm representing Citi at the time, so I had to be very diplomatically correct. But I said, look, they're one of the more progressive ones out there. And they recognize that they may need to create more space for appropriate and thoughtful failure. That it can't just be about consent orders because that's the way the law has been interpreted for the last 100 years. Like, they've got to change the way they're thinking. And I think some governments, unfortunately not ours, is leaning in more aggressively and more proactively and helping to redefine the space and to enable innovation in fintech. Hopefully ours will play a more active role in the future.
Okay. All right. Anybody have any questions? Got a microphone over there. Oh, good. Here's one.
Hi. Can you talk a little bit about your view on the blockchain and financial industry?
Sure. Who wants to go? You want to start?
I'll start just because I don't know enough about it, as much about it as I need to. It's something that we are actively investigating because, because the ledger is a very powerful tool for us in terms of innovation that we're trying to make in the world of fraud and credit mitigation and all of that. But I'm going to pass it down to someone who hopefully can speak in more detail about that.
So let's talk about what blockchain does. And it allows transparency, and it allows encryption of data, and it allows protection. I mean, all those things in creating bounding contracts. So you can authenticate an asset or an individual or a monetary position. I'm all for that, and we need that. Right now, the way the systems have been architected, it is absolutely ripe for failure, and we see that every day. So I think a technology such as blockchain, and blockchain specifically, needs to play a much more active role as we re-architect the financial systems of the future. Now, the question, which I've been debating with some people outside of Citi, is, do you need blockchain to solve those same needs? Do you actually need blockchain, or is it the right architecture to look at real-time settlement and the encryption at the levels that we need to, and immunity and all those types of things? So I am a big proponent of it. My thing around blockchain is, what is that one use case that is going to tip it, that's going to tip the scales? And I have been of the opinion of cross-border trade is probably the right one, or remittances, because it's a $600 billion industry. People are taking transaction fees of upwards of 11%. Like, it's inequitable and it's unfair, but we're not there yet. So that's my opinion on it. I'm still forming it over time. I definitely have an opinion on crypto, but I will not comment on that given where I'm sitting and who I work for. So I'll leave that to be.
Yeah, and I would have to agree. I think it's really, where does blockchain fit into the financial ecosystem, right? And what exactly should it be used for? What are the most efficient ways to use a distributed ledger, and how and if it is actually necessary? And I do think the payments and remittance and cross-border, that is huge, and identity. And then particularly when you think about the unbanked, right? It is a great way for other countries around the world, and even places here, to really start to create credit identity for folks. And that is an interesting way to think about it. I also have interesting views on crypto and ICOs and things like that, which I will not discuss here because I'm still forming that. But in terms of blockchain, that is what I think as well.
Can I ask a quick follow-up, which is just, and one of you can take this. I interviewed lots of blockchain, lots of crypto, lots of ICO people. It's so male. And it's funny to me that it's such it's a very exciting area of finance right now, almost like the weed stuff is and all the pot stocks. But just like the guys they just run to it. They're just going there. Is this anecdotal and just me, or do you guys feel and see that at all? And is it a place where we should also be like, all right, pipeline, need to figure out how to get more people into it, or is it just like a fancy, shiny thing and we don't need to focus
There's a whole host of questions in that. I don't think it's fancy and shiny. I think it is a technology that is going to revolutionize the way that we live, just like the internet did back in the early 90s, when it became more commercial. I actually see a lot of women in the blockchain space, but they're in supportive roles, interestingly enough. They're not the ones that are leading the charge, that are out in the media, that are doing the debate on CNBC, those. So Yeah, exactly. So I do see them. They're just not as visible, and we could probably
Count
explore why, but you can count them too.
Yes, count them.
Well, they're there and people are interested in it, so that's good.
It's
Any more?
fascinating
One more
technology.
question? Any more? You guys good? All right, go ahead. Oh, yes.
The A student.
A student.
Thanks for making time to be here. My question is about political correctness, or like how you deal with it on a daily basis.
With political correctness?
Yes, in terms of saying the politically correct thing, saying the right thing, but not necessarily in support of the idea that you're there for. Do you find yourself in situations where you have to say the right thing, but not necessarily believing in it, just so you can get the VC funding, or just so you can help other women too by coming to that position? Do you ever find yourself in those positions, and how do you deal with that?
So
That's a real question. I guess that we all need to.
I mean, so I'll just say one thing. I'm not politically correct. You probably ask a number of the people who I work with in this room. I am. Here's what I live by: is you have to be authentic to who you are. You have to believe in what you stand up for. When you're leading other people, they have to know that you stand behind what you will fight for. And sometimes that's going to mean that you go to the mat for things that are not politically correct. And it's all about how you do it. So for me, it's about being who you are and standing behind what you believe.
Yeah, and I would have to agree with that. I mean, I think as you go through the course of your career, you understand how to maintain and dance throughout being your authentic self to get your point across, but you should never not be who you were going to be, right? And I do think that at some point, there's some battles you're going to lose because of that, and there's some battles that you're going to win, and you want to be proud of the battles that you win and know why you've won them. And so to me, political correctness is just about bringing your authentic self to work every day in a way that's meaningful, in a way that's not going to be detrimental to the people around you or the thing that you're trying to do or build, right?
Yeah, my mom always said to me, like, which is crazy, because, you know, I am in my 40s. I'm not that Gen X. Like, you got to put your head on your pillow every night and be okay going to bed. You know, and if you can do that, you're standing up for what you believe and how you're brought up and for the people that you want to support. And it's pretty simple.
And I'll say a Pollyanna thing, which I think is true, that by being your authentic self, you know, maybe you need to be diplomatic at times, you know, how you parse your words. But if you're authentic to the core values, I think that leads to greater success than, you know, being someone who says whatever seems to be, you know, what everyone wants to hear in the room at that moment.
Right.
I love it. A great note to end on. Good question. Fun. Thank you very much, Dionne, Carey, and Victoria.
Thank you for the questions.
Thanking Jen Rogers, Victoria Meakin, Carey Kolaja, and Dionne Gumbs for their great insight.